Hello, everyone. We are just starting the third info session with the topic on biochar today, but we'll give a bit of time for everyone to check in, dial in with the first three people in the room. So let's give a bit more time until we have more. If you have some spare time, you can follow us on LinkedIn with Freeze Carbon to stay up to date, hosting lots of info sessions, webinars, but also posting general knowledge about the topic of carbon credits and equality and transparency is so much needed to help this market grow. Maybe let's get started with a quick introduction. So, hey everyone, my name is Thorsten. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Freeze Carbon. We help companies to find high-quality carbon credits. For that, we do detailed analysis of all the carbon projects out there and only put the best of the best onto our platform and then help the corporates which identified unavoidable emissions to neutralize these with the help of carbon credits. We have a wide range of project types, and today we'll actually dive deeper into the topic of biochar. So if you haven't heard about it, or if you're interested to buying carbon credits, the session is perfect for you today to learn as much as possible in the given time around this carbon removal project type. So let's get into it. Biochar is, as I mentioned, a carbon removal project, meaning it removes existing CO2 from the atmosphere. And it does so with the permanence of over 100 years or over 1,000 years. And we'll dive into that in a second. But first, let's explore biochar, what it is and how it works. And let me quickly share this page with you. I think there's a good broad overview of the mechanics. So firstly, on the left side, we see biomass, which through the process of photosynthesis took CO2 out of the atmosphere and stored it in its own material. And if we use this material, this agricultural waste or other waste material, and burn it at very high temperatures, we get an end product, which is char. And this char, this biochar, can then be used for other applications. And depending on the process, it is stable for 100 years or over 1,000 years, and therefore a very good medium to long-term carbon removal project type. I'll go into all the nuances during the session, and please also use the chat if you have any questions around it. But first, I would address the left side of the image, is the biomass. So different types of biomass, and I want to go through them bit by bit. So the first one is actually agricultural residue. So this can be crop residue, can be husk, like rice husk on rice fields. It can be shells, like coconut shells, like we see here, or it can be nut shells, but also straw from any kind of wheat, for example. And all these residues in the past, they're usually left to decompose. Sometimes in some countries, they're even burned off as waste material. But sometimes it's also used in energy and in bioenergy plants. But these residue materials, they already locked up carbon inside, but it's not very stable. So we need, of course, the biochar projects to stabilize this. Other materials we have is forest residue, and we see it on the image with the little wood symbol at the top left corner. So this can be wood chips, sawdust in mills, can be bark, meaning this is coming from the forest. It can be very beneficial if we take this old dead wood out of the forest and make use of it. It can also lead the forest to have more space to grow fresh trees. But we need to be careful that we don't take too much out of the forest as of before, to, of course, keep the healthy plants and the healthy trees left standing to do their job of retaining carbon in a natural way. And then we have other materials, for example, urban green waste. This could be from the city, the municipalities, which are the owner of a lot of land property, let's say on the side of the street or the pedestrian walk, yard clippings, tree trimmings, garden waste, stuff like that we can also use. Or then very dedicated energy crops. That means crops that grow very quickly, like hemp, for example, switchgrass, which is planted for the sole purpose to naturally absorb the CO2 in a very, very fast way. There's super interesting projects out there which implement this because these crops can be harvested multiple times over the course of the year and therefore can be used for a natural CO2 intake. Perfect. And always feel free to use the chat on the right side if you want to learn more about any of these biomasses that can be used here. Super. Next one, a big topic in biochar projects you should dive deep into is the moisture level of this biomass on the left-hand side. This drives a few factors. One is, for example, the energy efficiency. The higher the moisture level of the biomass, the more energy you need to dry it and then to burn it. So it's something you need to consider when you look at these projects. Another is the carbon content. So how much CO2 has been absorbed by this plant, by the tree, or the sawdust, the crop waste during the process of photosynthesis. Different levels can, of course, increase your output of biochar and increase the carbon removal content. So something you can look into in terms of efficiency. And then another effect or another driver of the biomass you use is the quality of the biochar that you get at the end of the day. So depending on the biomass that you use, you get different types of biochar and can use that, for example, in agricultural use. We'll dive into later. But it depends a lot what you put into the machine at the start, how you can use it then in different fields or in different applications. The next is the center of the picture is the production technologies, and there's two types. I'll quickly discuss them, and then we can dive deeper. What you see here is the technological side of things, where there's a pyrolysis machine. So there's really a big machine you need to build up with can be different types, can be like a conveyor belt where the biomass is dropped and then burned throughout the process, or it can be like a big pot where you put everything in, lock it, and burn it inside. So there's the technology side, and then there's the artisan style, where you make a pit in the ground or have a big kiln like a barrel or something like that, and you burn it inside that. So this is the more traditional way. So we have artisan, the more traditional way, and then the technology based with high tech machines. So it's not like the technology exists already for a long time, but it's machine based. To dive into both types, and again, there's a chat if you have any questions. Starting with artisan. So the artisan way is these pits in the ground, for example, or a kiln like a barrel where you put the biomass in and burn it off. These are typically used in the global south or in countries where this is applied in a very decentralized process, meaning very small farmers are doing this one by one by one. The big benefit here is, of course, that you don't have high upfront investment costs, so everyone can literally do this. And another big benefit of doing the artisan way for these small farmers, especially in the global south, is that you give them two things. First, you give them a method to create their own fertilizer. This biochar can later be used on the field as a natural fertilizer using their own waste material. And secondly, you create an income source for these small farmers because they participate in the carbon credit revenue share of each of the carbon credit a corporate buys at the end of the day. So it's a very high benefit for them. Another factor is, of course, that this biochar helps them save a lot of water when irrigating their fields, when watering their fields, which can be a big benefit, especially in regions where rainfall is not frequent. On the other side, the artisan way is harder to measure. You especially have to be careful of the moisture level of the biomass and control it every time you put it into the pit when you burn it off. And you have also other gases that come out of the process, which you need to calculate for and put some safety margins in. So the calculation part of the carbon removal amount is a bit more tricky. Now switching over to the tech side of things, on the tech machines, we have pyrolysis machines. They have a bigger upfront cost, of course, to set them up. There's now established players that produce these machines, but some projects also develop their own technology, depending on the size of the operation and the location of the operation. And the benefit of these machines is that you can control all the elements a bit better. For example, the gases that come out of the system, you can capture them or burn them off. But you have also additional outcomes. We see them on the right side, not just the biochar, but for example, there's like gases coming out, pyrolysis oil is coming out, heat energy that is being created you can utilize for other processes, maybe industrial processes or for heating into the energy system, district heating system. So the machine has these benefits, but of course this cannot be done on a small scale or a decentralized scale. This always needs to be a proper setup of an operation. The next topic we want to touch on is the topic of permanence. Perfect. There was a question. How does the heating work and the artisan method of small farmers? So you can imagine that there's two ways how they do this. The first way is that they dig a hole into the ground, they close it off with clay, and then they have a pit. So it's a closed off pit, and they put the biomass in, they burn it off. There's usually, with the projects we work with, there's a verifier coming every single time they do this process, and they check the temperature within the pit. And because the pit only has one side where the temperature can escape, it's closed off on all the other sides at the bottom on the sides. The temperature gets to a very high level. And it's sealed off with clay to make sure that everything is secure inside this. Or it's done within a pot, so to say. It's called a kilt, where again all sides are sealed off, and only to the top the heat can escape, and there you also reach very high temperatures. So it's not an open field burning, but it's more like inside a pot, where these temperatures, a couple of 100 degrees, can be reached to create that char. And the important part in the artisan way is also that you continue to put in a controlled way more biomass onto it, so that it always reaches that char level, and then you add more to it as you go. Thanks very much for that question. I would jump to the topic of permanence, because this is a very interesting question that comes up a lot in the carbon removal space. So all these different project types have different timeframes, how long they store the carbon. Biochar is known for two levels. One is over 100 years and the other is over 1,000 years. That means there's different certification processes out there and methodologies that certify the projects. The 100 years is very common and very widely accepted, and the 1,000 years is something that is issued if the company can prove certain things around the moisture of the biomass type, and so on, and the production process. And even then, only 75% of the biochar that's being produced can be labeled as 1,000-year permanent. The remaining 25% is then not that long permanent, typically also certified for 100 years. But this gives an extremely interesting option to the market, saying, okay, I have a carbon removal project type that actually locks up CO2 for over 1,000 years, which is hopefully a good enough time frame to get everything right on the climate change issue. And therefore, a lot of companies are currently, and a lot of projects are currently developing these projects, and companies looking into these, because there has been a lot of struggle with other project types with less than 100 years. And so there's currently a flight to this high permanence project category. Super. The next question is around application we wanted to touch on. So now I create something, I stabilize the CO2 within the char or other products. Where is it used? So the most common use today is in agriculture, in soil use. This can increase many elements in the soil, but the most famous and the most widely recognized use case is that it increases water retention. This biochar is very not like a sponge, but very porous, and therefore, whenever the farmers irrigate their farm or rain falls down, the water stays longer within the soil and doesn't trickle down to the groundwater so quickly. So even on dry days, you have a lot of water within the soil, which then can be released to the plants. This is, of course, extremely resource efficient, but also cost efficient for farmers where water is an expensive resource or is a crop which needs a lot of water. Additional benefits are that you can mix your char with, for example, animal manure, and then you have more fertilizer, more natural fertilizer in the ground. And also this char, as it's so porous, there's lots of space for microbes to grow within the char, and then you have a lot of minerals. Have a lot of soil benefits from these microbes that sit within the top layer of your field. Another newly or more or less newly field of using the char is, for example, in livestock farming. But then there's also other elements around construction material being explored in concrete, really for buildings, in plastics. So there's a lot of development currently ongoing to say, like, okay, what are the applications outside agriculture? How can we use this and make this entire process more profitable and therefore easier to set up, and therefore faster to scale, hopefully. That's the big idea. Yeah, the big difference between 100 years and 1,000 years. Yeah, very good question. So in all transparency, this is mainly due to the certification companies which have developed different protocols. And the key word is actually that the one protocol says that this char is stable for over 100 years. So they say, oh, it's the minimum 100 years is given, and then it could be much longer, or over 1,000 years. So there's a lot of research being done now to evaluate if this is not just 1,000 years, but it's 3,000 years or 5,000 years or 7,000 years. And we need more work to do this. But currently, these two protocols have been established, and there's a lot of research behind each to provide these level of certainty around 100 years and 1,000 years. But I could imagine that there might be more nuances in the future where there's another protocol saying this is for 500 years or this is for 2,000 years. But of course, at some point, we need to decide whether we need to engineer it for 1,000 years or 2,000 years, if there's a big difference for us for now. Also, if we see this then later in the production process being more costly, yes or no, and then the carbon credit being more costly, yes or no. But these are the two protocols that have been set up so far. And then lastly, especially if there's any corporates out here looking into buying carbon credits, what is a very common question is then the price question. And here we have the price graph of biochar over the last couple of years. Biochar started out at below 30 euros even per ton of CO2 removed. So one ton of CO2 removed is always one carbon credit. And since then, it's just been rising and is currently at 145 euros per ton as a market average. There have been transactions which have been above this market price. You see the spikes, but currently it's 145. What we expect to see in the future, that there might be a difference in prices for the two different levels of permanence, 100 years and 1,000 years, and potentially for the two different production types, so technology-based and artisan-based. But the market is still figuring out market prices for all these variations. But overall, it's 145 euros you find on the market today. And I don't want to look into the crystal ball where this price is developing towards. but currently we see that demand is still exceeding supply, and that's of course shown in the mark price that is rising over time. Perfect. Are there any other questions? Otherwise, this would be the session for today on biochar, just an introduction session. We are working with a lot of partners in the space and would be very happy to bring them into one of our next sessions, if this is of interest to you, to talk about how to specifically calculate the amount of carbon removed on these projects and dive deeper. But happy to also get other topics suggested from you in the chat. We prepared one, but we can always update our schedule based on your requests. So the next topic theoretically would be the volumes of carbon credits in the market and the availability of each by project type, because that's a current topic for a lot of large companies, what is available and how fast is the market scaling up. I'll give a bit of time quickly now. Happy to answer also any questions that you have. Perfect. If there's no other questions left, happy to answer them also at the later stage. You can reach me on LinkedIn or via our website, freezecarbon.com. And looking forward to seeing you in the next session. Thank you very much.